If you live in this part of the United States, you might die nearly a decade earlier than others. It sounds unbelievable, but statistics show it's true for people in Alabama, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Georgia. For many years, scientists tried to find an explanation. They blamed poverty, climate, and diet, but none of those answers were convincing. It wasn't until artificial intelligence began scanning decades of mortality, climate, and disaster data that the truth finally started to emerge. AI discovered something horrifying, a silent killer hiding among us. Not disease, not poverty, but the ghost of hurricanes that seemed to have passed long ago. It all began when two scientists, Rachel E.K. Hartman and Solomon M. Xiang, fed nearly a century of data into a machine learning model. Millions of death records, medical archives, and climate information from 1930 to 2015. They wanted to test whether hurricanes had long-term effects on public health. The results left them speechless. AI found a hidden pattern in the data known as the mortality ghost. According to its model, every tropical storm doesn't just kill when it makes landfall. It continues to cause excess deaths for 10 to 15 years afterward. On average, according to official reports, a hurricane directly kills about 20 to 30 people, mostly from drowning or building collapse. But when AI extended the analysis over time, it found that each storm could actually cause between 7,000 and 11,000 indirect deaths in the years that followed, about 300 times higher than the reported number. When added up from 1950 to 2015, AI estimated that between 3 million and 5 million Americans have died from the long-term effects of hurricanes, more than the total number of U.S. soldiers killed in World War I, World War II, and the Civil War combined. When these results were first shared internally, the research team thought the algorithm must be wrong. They spent 5 years checking it again, rerunning the model, changing variables, filtering out noise. But the results remained the same. There was no error. We were certain there had to be a mistake, they said, but eventually we had to admit it was real. So hurricanes don't just tear off roofs, they quietly collapse the lifespan of an entire generation. Never before has the United States been more prepared for hurricanes than it is today. Early warning systems are now linked to satellites, Doppler radar, and vast mobile phone networks. When a storm forms, millions of emergency alerts are sent out within seconds. Helicopters, rescue teams, and hundreds of FEMA trucks move instantly into position. On the news, the number of direct deaths keeps dropping, and that seems to prove America has conquered nature. But wait, remember 2005? Hurricane Katrina devastated New Orleans, killing 183 people. 16 years later, Hurricane Ida, with nearly identical wind strength, struck the same region and caused only 107 direct deaths. The media called it a milestone of technological and disaster management progress. Yet behind those headlines, AI uncovered a truth that was completely the opposite. When scientists fed decades of mortality, medical, and socioeconomic data into machine learning models, AI revealed that Americans weren't only dying in hurricanes, they were dying after them. The drop in instant deaths simply masked the rise in slow deaths. Humanity had won on the day of the disaster, but lost in the years that followed. In reality, official statistics only record direct deaths caused by flooding, collapsing buildings, or high winds. But AI revealed another category: indirect deaths that unfold over decades. These are the survivors who develop respiratory illness from inhaling oil smoke. On paper, they died of cardiovascular disease, stroke, or infection. But in big data, AI saw that all of them lived in regions once struck by hurricanes. One researcher compared it like this: it's as if you counted the bodies at the crash site, but forgot about the hundreds who later die from medical debt, depression, or a collapsing health system. While FEMA proudly reports that the number of people saved increases each year, life expectancy charts in the Southeast keep sinking. In Alabama, average lifespan is nearly 10 years shorter than the national average. In Mississippi, death rates from heart disease, stroke, and depression are 1.5 times higher than in northern states. Yet no one connected those numbers to hurricanes until AI put them together. AI even detected a hidden cycle. After every major storm, mortality rates rise steadily for 10 to 15 years, like ripples spreading across a lake long after the stone has sunk. That's why scientists call it the hurricane mortality shadow, a phenomenon unseen, unheard, yet woven through entire communities. How ironic that while we celebrate technology for taming nature, it is that same technology now revealing that the disaster never truly left. And now, AI has gone even deeper, shattering the long-standing misconceptions Americans have about the true cost of hurricanes. Let's look at the data that speaks and the painful realities behind it. No one imagined that a storm from over a decade ago could still be killing people. But data collected by AI from millions of medical records across the southeastern United States shows the opposite. Death doesn't stop when the sky clears. Louisiana became the first place where tragedy began to spread. After Hurricane Katrina, dozens of chemical plants along the Mississippi River were destroyed. Massive storage tanks leaked benzene, mercury, and arsenic into the groundwater. Poor communities, unable to relocate, kept drilling wells, using that same contaminated water for cooking, bathing, and drinking every day. A few years later, hospitals in Baton Rouge and New Orleans started reporting a surge in liver and kidney cancers, rising 30 to 40%, with some areas exceeding twice the national average. No one connected it to the hurricane. In medical records, the causes were still listed as lifestyle, genetics, or local pollution. But AI saw something else, a perfect pattern, matching the storm's path with haunting precision. In Florida, the tragedy took on a different form: disappearance. When hurricanes swept through, people vanished from the very places they once called home. Tens of thousands lost their houses, their jobs, and were forced to migrate to unfamiliar regions. In doing so, they also lost their safety nets: family doctors, schools, churches, and communities that once kept their lives stable. That rupture left an invisible wound: depression, anxiety, and hypertension. According to research from the University of Florida, prescriptions for antidepressants rose by nearly 25% in the 2 years following Hurricane Irma in 2017. And when stress becomes permanent, the body begins to collapse. Stroke, heart attack, suicide. None of those deaths were labeled as hurricane victims, yet all of them began at the moment the wind stopped blowing. In Mississippi, CDC data told a hauntingly similar story. In the 5 years following Hurricane Katrina, heart disease mortality doubled. At first, researchers assumed it was coincidence. But when AI overlaid storm tracks with medical maps, the alignment was chilling. The lines matched perfectly, county by county. Every place the hurricane passed was a place where hearts stopped beating sooner. Then came Georgia, once drowned by the floodwaters of Hurricane Michael in 2018. Over the next 3 years, cases of pneumonia and respiratory illness surged by 40%. Hospitals were exhausted, recovery budgets slashed, and thousands of elderly patients went untreated. They died quietly, No headlines, no warnings. Their death certificates marked with a single phrase: respiratory infection. And the most chilling finding of all, children born years after the storm still carry its invisible scars. In areas hit hardest, infant mortality rates are 20 to 30% higher than the national average. Not because of bad genes, but because of social aftershocks. Poorer parents, toxic environments, and weaker healthcare systems. The storms are gone, but the mortality shadow remains. In every drop of well water, every medical debt, every heart attack, and in the silence of communities that never truly recovered. But this tragedy is no longer confined within America's borders. When the AI model was expanded worldwide, it began to uncover a horrifying truth. The mortality shadow has no nationality, no boundaries, and it is operating more quietly than any war. When AI compiled billions of medical records, meteorological data, and satellite imagery from the past 2 decades, it discovered curves that matched with terrifying precision. Death fingerprints, appearing everywhere. From Europe and North America to South Asia and Africa, waves of death never occur instantly during storms or heat waves. They come later, weeks or months afterward, as if the earth itself is still bleeding after every strike of nature. In Europe, AI revealed that the summer of 2022 was not merely a record-breaking season, but a silent massacre. When temperatures in France and Spain exceeded 40 degrees Celsius, health systems recorded more than 60,000 excess deaths. Yet, in the records, most were classified under ordinary causes: heart disease, stroke, dehydration, or diabetic complications. When AI ran a reverse time analysis, it found that each mortality peak aligned precisely with the heat wave days and continued to ripple across the following months. Climate scientists call this the biological aftershock effect. Death delayed, but unavoidable. Worse still, in Germany and Italy, AI identified a generational consequence. Children born during extreme heat seasons have a 35% higher risk of cardiovascular disease in adulthood. In other words, the climate doesn't just kill, it is reprogramming human life itself. Crossing the Atlantic, California tells an equally grim story. Here, the killer doesn't come in the form of storms or floods. It comes as smoke. Since 2015, NASA satellite imagery has shown that wildfire-burned areas have increased 6-fold, and fine particulate matter, PM2.5, from these fires has blanketed the skies over Los Angeles and San Francisco for hundreds of days each year. When AI merged hospital data with atmospheric records, it uncovered a chilling pattern. Hospitalizations for respiratory, cardiovascular, and mental health conditions jumped by 14 to 20% within just 90 days after major wildfire events. A research group at Stanford University named the phenomenon airborne trauma, psychological and physiological damage caused simply by breathing poisoned air. The irony is devastating. Even though the United States has reduced industrial pollution for half a century, wildfires are now erasing nearly 50% of the progress once achieved by the Clean Air Act. In other words, Americans today are breathing the same toxic air their parents inhaled back in the 1970s. According to AI projections, at least 48,000 premature deaths every year can be traced back to wildfire smoke. Yet on official death certificates, they appear under familiar causes: pneumonia, respiratory failure, or lung cancer. South Asia is no exception to the spiral. During the historic 2022 floods in Pakistan, the world recorded 1,739 deaths. But AI uncovered a far darker reality buried beneath official statistics. More than 260,000 additional people died in the following 12 months, from contaminated water, cholera, malaria, and malnutrition. None of these deaths were ever labeled as disaster victims because they happened in peacetime, long after the headlines had faded. AI gave this phenomenon a name: aftershock mortality, death that arrives late but inevitably, like the trembling ground that still shudders long after the earthquake has passed. Across Africa, where drought has become the steady pulse of the continent, data from Ethiopia, Sudan, and Kenya reveal disasters unfolding in the slowest, most merciless way imaginable. In regions that endured 3 consecutive years of crop failure, child mortality under 5 doubled compared to nearby areas. AI traced a chain of cause and effect that no one had ever fully connected before. Water scarcity leads to reduced breastfeeding, which causes microbiome imbalance, then immune collapse, and finally, mass death. Here, nature doesn't kill in an instant. It watches life fade, one fragile body at a time. So the true killer is not the storm, the fire, or the flood. It is the silence that follows, when humanity believes it has survived. And perhaps the most terrifying part is not that AI saw this truth, but that it took millions of deaths around the world for us to finally recognize it. Even more painfully, humanity may have felt this truth long ago. It simply lacked the words and the science to express it. In the American South, people still whisper a haunting phrase: "The storm takes your house, then it takes your heart." What once sounded like poetry has now been proven as biological, psychological, and social truth, repeated for centuries. In the rural coastal communities of the Gulf Coast during the 19th century, folklorists recorded strange phenomena. Months after each major hurricane, village death rates would rise noticeably. Not from flooding, but from peculiar illnesses, lingering colds, weak hearts, depression, or loss of vitality. They called it the storm sickness. At that time, there was no concept of post-traumatic stress disorder, no way to measure groundwater toxicity, and no understanding of hormone collapse caused by chronic stress. A 2016 study by Tulane University found evidence of what the ancestors once described. In the 3 years after Hurricane Katrina, suicide rates in New Orleans rose by 275%. Clinical depression quadrupled, and nearly 1/3 of residents required sedatives. For many, the hurricane didn't end when the house was rebuilt. It lived on in their dreams, their heartbeats, and every rainfall that followed. In Louisiana's bayou regions, elders still tell their grandchildren about the sorrow of the ice of earth. When the water drains away, fish die, trees bear no fruit, and people grow weaker. Today, science explains this phenomenon. Heavy metals and toxic microbes from flooded factories seep into the soil and the food chain. AI found that in regions with high industrial flooding, cancer rates increased by 30 to 40% within 5 to 10 years. To earlier generations, this was divine punishment. But today, it is statistical evidence. Even in Southern folk songs, traces of this memory remain. An old lullaby from the Mississippi Delta sings, "After the storm, the cold wind stays, the gone don't return, the child sleeps through the rain." Anthropologists believe these lyrics preserve memories of villages erased by hurricanes, where illness and despair lingered for years. Now, artificial intelligence is simply doing what humanity once did by instinct, confirming that folklore was never superstition. The old stories, the lullabies, the sayings once born of fear are now recognized as emotional datasets, passed down through generations until science became strong enough to read them. We think we've entered an age of satellites, sensors, and algorithms. But perhaps, deep down, our ancestors knew far more than we imagined. They had no AI, but they had intuition. And sometimes, human intuition could sense the shadow of death long before data could name it. So AI didn't just expose data. It revealed the true cost of indifference, the stolen years of life taken after every storm, every heat wave, every wildfire. The problem is not the disaster itself. It is how society recovers afterward. If we don't change, people in the American South will continue to lose an entire decade of life without ever knowing why. So what do you think will happen next? Don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, and share this video to help spread the truth.